Adam Duritz is the singer of Counting Crows, and I've been a longtime fan because a lot of it has to do with not only with their great music and Adam singing, but I actually am a great admirer of the way Adam writes, the way he tells stories, the way he connects with people. And here to talk about sort of the idea, the concept of an audience with an audience of audiences is Aaron Ray from The Collective and Adam Duritz from the Counting Crows. Let's bring them up on stage.
All right.
It's a very soft couch.
Yes.
Wow.
I'd like to thank Brian and Bill and Mike for having such a great event. And I think that Pivot has been a real eye-opener for a lot of people. And certainly I've certainly learned and met a lot of interesting things. Adam, might as well go ahead and jump into this. One of the big issues that seems to be debated around in the blogosphere and out on the internet in general is the idea of authenticity and how to engage fans. As you know, and I'll share with the crowd, you've sold 40 million albums in the old music system, been nominated for Academy Award, Grammy Awards. You thrived in that old system where there was buffers and filters. How, with the 1.27 million Twitter followers, have you been able to engage and evolve since then?
Well, I mean, as successful as we were in the old record business, it's impossible to ignore, to me, that it's just, after a certain point, just luck. It's a terrible system. I mean, it fails with 99% of the people out there. Every once in a while, you find yourself at the center of the culture, but most of the time, you don't. I've wanted to be independent for a long time because I really believe that, you know, with everything we've got on the internet and with the right smart people around you, you can do this yourself, and you can do it much more effectively. I've heard a lot of people come in here over the last few days. I've heard some amazing philosophies and some great ideas, which I was glad. There's a lot of forward thinking going on, not just, you know, nuts and bolts thinking, but a lot of forward thinking about the philosophy does drive the market eventually. And so it's important to think that way. I haven't heard a lot of people come up here and tell you what they thought you should do, actually, until the last speakers, until the Facebook had a sort of workshop on how to use it on their site. Now, I don't have a platform. And sorry about all the writing. I was up all night doing this. But I don't have a platform of my own to tell you to get on. But I will tell you what I think you should do out there, you know, how to make use of the whole internet in a much more dependable way, I think. It works for music. I think it works for everything. I'm going to tell you a little about what we do, but I think it relates. And I want to tell you about, I really want to talk about a bunch of places where I think people screwed up, where they took this vast amount of data that comes in that we make use of, and they got it the wrong way, interpreted it the wrong way, and made a huge mistake in how they applied it. But at first, I want to start with what I really tell you, what I think you need to do. I think there is a way to approach moving into the world with whatever your thing is. And I think the fact that we're here for a social media conference is sort of emblematic of that. I think you still need to go out there and make personal connections. I know that seems old-fashioned, seems like a lot of heavy lifting, but you have to remember it's not a one-to-one thing anymore. If you make an informed personal connection nowadays through social media, it balloons out from there. The ripple effects are enormous, especially if you're thoughtful about how you do it. But it's not just about making friends or getting likes. That works on Facebook, but not everywhere on the internet. It actually is really personal. I think there's a very interesting contradiction in that computers and social media, computers which are a technological pull into the future, but social media, which exploded out of the personal computer thing, is actually a pull towards a philosophical past of just not about gathering numbers and creating order, but about the way people actually interact. It's not just a model of how people interact. It's actually all it is. It's a place for your high school reunion, or it's a lunch cafeteria. And it really works that way, but it works because they found a way on this future instrument to make a very conservative, almost rural feeling sort of thing. You just interact with your friends on it. And I think the reason that you screw up with this when you do the direct marketing, because it doesn't always work, and I think that's because viral isn't linear. It's a personal connection. Viral at its best is reciprocal. You know, virally spreading information doesn't go out like this. It just doesn't. It doesn't originate with you and go out like this. It's about a bunch of networks of connections that go out from you like this, that come back from other people like that, and it spreads out from all of you. And what makes it powerful is you just can't trust all the people you know to go, and they told 2 friends, and they told 2 friends, and they told 2 friends. It doesn't work that way. What does work is if you develop a connection between the 2 of you, and then it's motivating on that part too. It's reciprocal, just like actual, well, it's just like actual friendship is. I mean, this thing we're in is actually what it's always said it is. It's social media. It's not a branching tool for you. It's actual social media. You can't benefit from all that you learn from social media on social media without understanding there's a social thing happening. And I want to bring this up because as everything changes all the time, and it does, it moves faster and faster, and what you depended on yesterday, you cannot depend on tomorrow. Popular zeitgeist that made you $1 billion is not going to make it next time, and especially not going to make it for you just because the other guy did it. But one thing you can depend on is this. Social media is huge, and it is always going to be a reflection of the way people interact with each other. And that is going to stay in different venues. But if you think about it, you know what to do. And I'll get more into that. I'm going to talk about that throughout this, and I'm also talking, like I said, about where people sort of screw this up.
I think that one of the issues that we had talked about before is data, and people throwing around, I've got 10 million fans, I've got 30 million followers, and this and that and whatever, and I can speak from on behalf of Adam and several other clients that then there's the real statistics, and many of you know what I'm talking about. There are a lot of sentiment analysis companies out here, and a lot of them emerging, and I suspect that sorting through these large piles of data and finding out who the influencers are is going to be a big part of the future. One of the things that we discussed is those metrics being used wrong, and in the past, radio has traditionally been made its own decisions for people, and has been Counting Crows has done well with radio, but they have now they're being used as the model of what is broken. And do you want to get into a little bit of that and the measurement systems and why they're making decisions for people that not?
I mean, when I thought about how to explain this, there are a lot of little things we do that relate to all the different aspects of this, but there's so many different things that it didn't seem like one unifying sort of theme. But when I thought about it, the ways in which radio screwed up when they hit the research part, when they started getting research in the 90s really, and changed the way they programmed because of that, I think you'll be able to see how it relates to everything you can do wrong nowadays as well. Like I said before, it's about how you get your information, it's about how you interpret it, it's about how you then put it into application. I think the other screw up is they completely, I'll get back to it later, but they dismiss the importance of discovery. It's too hard to chart discovery. You can't, that's about someone finding something they didn't know they wanted. That's really hard to quantify ahead of time, so they put it aside. And they got rid of sort of passion in it too, because another thing is just difficult to deal with, but it's a big part of something like music. It's a big part of anything that you get excited about. And the thing is that rigid, faulty thinking like this can really screw you up. It's a difference between the future is this, period, which is then taken to its logical end, which is as far as it will possibly go, and the future in my particular situation, which is different and part of the arts or whatever I do, is this, and I'll take that as far as it still serves me, and when it starts to not relate to me, I'm not going to do it. I mean, people want plans so badly, they'll follow one that's not any good, even when it's clearly not good for them, because it looks like, oh, they can depend on that, and someone told them it's there, it's just, it makes sense to them. So where the radio programming comes into it is that how they chose to adapt to the changing is a really just a good lesson for how not to do it. It used to be when you had a complaint about a company, you write them a letter. That's what we always said is if you write a letter to a company, that they would give you whatever you want. They give you a free airline ticket because the people who wrote letters were crazy in their opinions, I think. So they just wanted to get you over with. And that sort of relates in a positive way to what was on the radio because people called in. People called in with a request. They called in to be in the concerts. To get in a contest, it had a lot to do with an engaged audience that was really involved in the station. And then someone had an idea at one point that those people are biased, and we shouldn't pay attention to what they're thinking because they have a bias. They're fans. And so they could call 50 times for their band. That's going to skew our numbers. It's not going to really be able to tell what they're doing. So we're going to ignore them, and we're going to make our own surveys of people that tell us, they're random. So we'll be able to get what we want out of them. And the call-ins stopped mattering at all. Radio stations didn't listen to you when you called in to request stuff. They didn't take it into account. I mean, that's like flipping the whole thing on its head. And it is true. They're right. It does skew the numbers, and they aren't good that way. But whose idea was it that people who really like your bands, that fans who are passionate about your music, who are passionate about your radio stations, who made the decision that they don't matter? I understand they skew your numbers, but you cannot just push them aside, and they did. So right there, you started with really, really faulty, stupid logic. And this is what people get into a lot on the internet. They add up the math of something. They find something that makes sense to them mathematically, and they don't really take into account that some things are worth more than other things. Just because your data's skewed doesn't mean you don't have to at least take it into account. And you start with faulty logic like that, and you're just screwed. I mean, and so what happens is, this is where the discovery part comes in, because radio now caters to everyone, but it doesn't inform or surprise anyone. And that, it just gets boring after a while. People get bored with, not just with the radio, but with music as a whole. Not that they dislike it, but they're just not invested the same way. It starts with a survey that knocks out people that care, and then it doesn't take into account there's a huge difference between what people will tell you they want or think they want and what they actually want. I mean, music's like a personal cool. It's like your clothes. You're not necessarily going to tell the truth about what you think in it. But they don't. It wouldn't be a bad thing if they had all these limitations, but they seem to have not taken any of them into account. And this sort of desire to have an answer for you is so tempting on the internet. And there's so many numbers that you think you can add them up, but you can go down a really bad path. I mean, what about what the audience wants to tell you? What about what they want out of you? I read a piece by Frank Eliason the other day on Brian Solis' site that said. Talked about customer service and social media, and they're really screwing up because not only are most social media sites not offering very good personal service, and that's sort of screwing up because you're not doing very good for your customers. So, but it's also a really huge mess up because there's no more engaged person than the person who calls you to complain about something. And we have a huge problem in having people engaged with us because they're just not invested in bands anymore or in anything, really. I know you have this problem finding clicks for people out there. Other than Facebook, where you can be guaranteed to get a certain small percentage of a huge number that's big enough for it to matter, outside of that, it's hard to get a click or anyone to pay attention. Well, there is no one more engaged in this world than someone who's calling you to complain about something. And it's not a negative either, because don't forget, they're calling you because they like your product enough to call you and ask you to help them make it work for them. They didn't just leave, which is so easy to do nowadays. You've got lots of choices. They actually called you. I mean, that's a wealth of information from that person that you can be. There's a survey for you. You want to talk to someone, they're calling you to talk to you about your thing. But they get ignored. I mean, how can you ignore someone who's that dedicated? This is the same thing as the caller research.